Welcome everybody to another episode of Hearts and Crafts. I am your host, ShawnSetGO, and of course I'm joined by my regular co-host, MidnyteTV. How you doing today, MidnyteTV?
I'm doing good, Sean. How you been, brother?
I've been absolutely awful. I've been working off the flu recently, and in between getting pretty heavy doses of WoW news. This is the first time I've ever just stopped playing Warrior and then went to leveling to see if there were greener pastures. So leveled a Rogue to 80 because I was like, I need to see what this is all about. And so we'll see if I stick with it. But that was my flu response was to play Rogue again. So that's where I'm at. How about yourself? How you been?
Yeah, don't disrespect Warrior. No, everything's great. I got AOTC last night, which was nice.
Nice.
I only had like 4 pulls on Gallywix. I hadn't had the chance to progress, but then I got on like my 5th pull with this community that I run with, and we were able to knock it out. And so pretty happy about that. And I've been going ham on pet collecting. I got a bunch of the Safari achievements, and I'm working on the Children's Week's pets right now. So that's been my week in WoW.
Yeah, I think Children's Week is one of those weeks that I don't think I've done the holiday events. Usually I do all like holiday events. I don't think I've done that one quite yet. Today, I thought we would talk about a lot of really just pressing things. You know, I thought with this being sort of like a 0.7 patch that we would get like trickling news, but it just kind of came all at once. That's what she said. And then all of a sudden we had drama left and right just popping off like crazy. And I think the first thing that really came to mind was this whole drama with the Dinars system, the Puzzling Cartel chips, which actually we have some brand new news if you want to talk about it, since you just saw it before I did. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, Midnight.
Yeah, sure. So just to kind of give a brief overview, the cartel chips were, the system was announced, and it was announced that you had to kill a mythic boss in order to get mythic track raid gear, which upset the Mythic Plus fan base. And as of 2 hours ago, they've walked that back, and they said now they're going to have Mythic Plus trinkets added to the Dinar system. So now the Mythic Plus players that were like, wait a minute, you know, the Raiders get access to this and we don't get access to our own thing. But they've walked that back. But the biggest controversy that I want to have a hot take on is the fact that the Mythic Plus fan base was so upset that they couldn't get access to Mythic Track raid trinkets for basically for free. And that really struck a nerve with me, because as someone who spent the better part of Dragonflight, actually all of Dragonflight, progressing as a Mythic Raider, getting those trinkets is hard enough. And for the Mythic Plus players to essentially like demand this high-end loot for basically nothing, it was really kind of offensive, to be honest with you. I was like, really? Like you guys are, Blizzard coddles you guys at like every step of the way, and now they've kind of caved. So that's the news right now with the Dinars. That's the controversy. But what do you think, Sean? What's your thoughts on it?
My thoughts on this is like, it's one of those things that if you're going to provide, as they said, deterministic loot, that basically you're going to give people routes to be that catch-all system, that fail system. I totally understand it being a system for the gear that you're earning. Basically, you do the content to get the gear that, you know, like you have to do the content in order to get that gear. A lot of people, I think, jumped too quickly into the people are going to start paying for these runs and then getting it once just so they can go ahead and get the loot. Like they went into like the worst case scenario, and I don't want to be like, there shouldn't be opportunities for people to bridge from the current content they're doing to the highest level of content. Like, as I understand it, to me, when you're considering like the levels and difficulty of content, I think delves to Mythic Plus to about heroic rating ish, and then from there on, it's all like rating content, and like, and they organize that, and I think in a decent way, to where rating content has a clear separation between the Mythic Plus content. There's a Mythic Plus BIS list, and there's a rating BIS list, and there's clear like hierarchy there. I think that's fine. I think the problem with adding this and including Mythic Plus now is the constant situation of let's fix the problem that we created ourselves and didn't need to create. So like this system as of a month ago didn't exist, and now now we had heard about what it was going to be in the patch updates. We saw it on that tree, that timeline, but at the same time it was this constant push and pull of like, what are they going to do? Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? Is it going to be like how it used to be? And now when they released it, they created this problem. And then instead of fixing the problem and the root of it, they went, let's patch and band-aid the problem we created by announcing this. So I think the true issue that I think this ignores is really just the drop rate of raid loot. If you're going to put such significance into raiding trinkets being the available trinkets, the problem is the drop rates, the problem is the lack of availability of good trinkets. It's not anything else other than that. To be like the true issue is we're not getting enough loot in Mythic Plus. It's not true. It's just you're not getting the gear that you need for the content that you play, or the level of content you play that's adequate enough for people to go, okay, I've reached this and this is adequate. There's a clear separation between the highest BIS list and the raid list and what we're getting in Mythic Plus. So I myself am not a high-end Mythic raider, so I know I'm not going to really excessively play that level. I don't feel like this is necessarily what I would want, even though this is like, okay, now I can basically stay in Mythic and not have to do I don't have to do much beyond that. I guess it doesn't feel like necessarily what a win like everyone I think is thinking.
Well, could you scroll down? There's someone made a comment. It's me, YY. Look at that comment right there. This is what I'm talking about. Look at what he says. Still a blank system gatekeeping raid loot for people that can spend 3 days a week for months wiping on mythic bosses. How dare players that can raid on a schedule, compete competitively, organize 20 people, fight the hardest designed bosses in the game. How dare they want a bad luck protection? And here's the crazy part. People forget that back in the day, the best trinkets, raid drops were lower. And to get a Deathbringer's Will from ICC, like you were one of like 10 people on your server that had one, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's just, I think that WoW becoming a lobby game, let me just queue into a lobby, get into my dungeon, get my gear and leave. Now all of a sudden now I want all the cool things the raiders are doing, and I want them for free. And you can see the amount of entitlement from these players. And you did a fantastic video about toxic WoW players. And I mean, you could have went on for like 2 hours on that subject. You kept it short at 18 minutes, but this is what I'm talking about here. And you saw it and I'm going to call these guys out, like Tettles and the Bench podcast. They were whining and crying about it. Like, how dare they not get, and here's the crazy part. If you were to get like the normal version of that trinket, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, like having, because usually a trinket has an effect on it. That affects scaling from like normal to mythic isn't that much. So if you could just, I could plug a normal right now while we're doing the podcast, and you can get your hands on that trinket. So like I said, it was a drama that came from a pure sense of entitlement, and the WoW player base is starting to get into that entitlement phase. But this is what happens when you constantly appease your player base. Yeah. You know, it's like they taught me this when I was in college about the Munich Agreement with Hitler. I hate to, bring Hitler into this, or Mustache Man. But appeasement only makes the aggressor more aggressive, and this is just a pure example of it.
Yeah, and I want to side with it for a second with the casual player base for a moment to say, like, despite the complaining, I understand where a lot of people are coming from in the argument of basically, I can't do this level of content, so this makes it accessible to me. I 100% agree that Mythic players consist of such a small player base. Mythic Raiders consist of such a small player base that we shouldn't curtail the game specifically for that group of players. We should, however, make things more accessible to the players who do that. So the people who are jumping into Mythic raiding should have access to those pieces of gear that need that bad luck protection. If it was just that, and they were going, hey, this is a way for those players to get their gear more accessibly, because doing this consistently is difficult, and we need something in place because drops and the amount of gear that's dropping is just not being given to the players that need it the most. And it's not, it's a small player base. And so we'll do things on top of that in Mythic Plus, specific for Mythic Plus loot pools that go, hey, here's another opportunity for you to have that catch-all. That way you're not going to the end of the season to get your piece of gear. If they kept those things separate, I think it would be an all-round win. But I think people only saw it as, this system is something I want. Give me this system, and I need to have access to stuff that I don't deserve. I've kind of given up on the argument of, like, because back then I was preaching nonstop of delvers need to understand that at a certain point, your content is not difficult enough. If you're not going to create different sets, like a set that's good for delves, a set that's good for Mythic Plus, a set that's for raiding, then you have to understand that content is a bridge to at a certain point in the next level of difficulty of content. You cannot expect to go, I want this, I deserve this, and now you're going to give me that gear, not going outside of it. And now that delves provide gilded crest, it's like there's honestly no reason. There really is no reason for a player to do that. And bridging that into our next topic is the add-on conversation. But it's been altogether a wild experience of I bounce between the game needs to be less complex for a majority of players, so the game doesn't need 1,000 add-ons. And then at the same time going, you need to put in a little bit more effort, or you need to understand that the difficulty here is put there for a reason. The reward pools are there for a reason. And at a certain point, it's Blizzard's job, yes, to make that accessible to you, but accessible to you in the sense that you're gonna be able to challenge yourself and do that yourself without a bunch of assistance and a bunch of research. I don't think that should be the case. So you should be able to do these things within the game.
Anyone that wants to, like, WoW has become more of a competitive game than an adventure. So people want to compete, and it is literally baked into the cake with that one button rotation that you now suffer a 0.2 second global cooldown penalty, which means every fifth ability is now missing, which means you're probably going to be at a 10 to 20% DPS loss, which is huge. This is awesome for people like me back in the day when I was a DPS raid leader. Instead of having to master my rotation, I could just hit one button and watch the timers and watch everyone. That would have been rad for me when I was a raid leader. But the competitive nature of the game, I think, is going to draw people away from that. But I do think that it's going to bring a lot of people up. And that's a good thing, because if you're in a pug or you're in LFR, it would be nice to have someone who could just press one button and do 20% more damage than they would have had they just were doing the worst thing possible, which is what a lot of people do in LFR. They just do the worst rotation possible.
Yeah.
So I do think that they're starting to notice, if they're coming out and introducing this system saying we need this game to be more accessible, they have some type of data that's showing they're not attracting new players. And it goes back to my argument with Fortnite is you log into Fortnite, you hop into a lobby, and bam, you're in the game, and there's very little you need to learn. Yeah. You can't really do that in WoW.
That's true accessibility.
Yeah. That's Fortnite, Black Call of Duty, they're the most accessible games ever developed, and that's why they're so popular. Anybody can pick it up and play. If you can pick up WoW, use the rotation helper, use a single button rotation, and perform well enough to not get kicked out of all these pugs, or to do well enough in, let's say, a casual guild to where you're holding your own, that's a good thing for the game. And like I said, the best players are going to ignore this feature. I mean, I ignore the standard Blizzard UI. I ignore the cooldown manager. I don't need it, but there are people that might want it, that don't want to fuck with weak auras and jam up their system. And I think this is great.
I feel like this is a system, that is created in response to the top level players and top guilds who they need people to fill their raids so they can get the Race the World first gear. They're like, hey, so now we're just gonna invite 20 people. It doesn't matter if you know what you're doing. You must have single button rotation. Jump in, everyone just single button it and funnel the loot to us so we can get this Race the World first over with quickly. I feel like the timeline of this is definitely strange, just because I remember there was a time where there was such a push to avoid people having single button macro rotations, because people used to like automate this to a T with lines and lines of text to try to see if they could do this, and they were very adamant against this. And it's funny how this has come sort of full circle to it being the case once again. But while we talk about this a little bit, let's hear it from Ian himself, and we'll watch a little bit of this to hear what exactly they're thinking of doing here.
Auto rotation. You can opt into that, and it will just automatically cast the next recommended ability in the sequence. There'll be a small GCD penalty associated with that, but we want to make sure that this is for accessibility purposes, that it's there for people who maybe just honestly aren't interested in the gameplay of like mastering their spec. They want to explore Azeroth and experience the story, and the mechanics kind of get in the way of that sometimes. This should be for them. Ideally, this is not a tool where someone is like being told by their raid leader to stop trying to DPS manually and just turn on the one button mode to meet some DPS check. That we want to give you the tools to kind of go through that organic progression naturally.
Great. But so the rotation assist.
So I feel like what he says there that gets at me is that it's not necessarily the part that we already talked about, which is basically to try to meet some DPS check. It's that last little bit.
Being told by their raid leader to stop trying to DPS manually and just turn on the one button mode to meet some DPS check. That we want to give you the tools to kind of go through that organic progression naturally.
So it's that last part right there. We want to give you the tools to get you through that and go through that organically, progress naturally. When this is the most unnatural way to progress through a game. How you would progress through a game in a normal online setting MMO is you would get these abilities one by one until you're max level, and by the time you reach max level, you have a general understanding of how your character is played. But nowadays, we're given all these abilities so quickly, and we level so fast that we don't have necessarily an understanding by the time we reach max level, or it's difficult to, because, well, when I was leveling, I only had to press this button, or I don't need these buttons because these buttons are specifically for groups. I was doing solo content. So I feel like what we're missing here is that if Blizzard truly wants organic progression through the game, what we need is a greater understanding of our abilities to be done so in a way that the way they used to be is like, if I'm going to be given my abilities one by one, give me scenarios where I can test my abilities in the game naturally, where I don't have to rely on guides telling me, hey, these are the buttons you need to press. Hey, here's an add-on that'll tell you what button you need to press. The game just isn't doing that right now. And I think the game used to be very much styled in a way that it was very understandable, because you would get these things one by one, and if they weren't understandable, those were the things that you would fill in the gaps, like, oh, my ability also does this, I didn't see that, or I didn't understand that. But now that we have so many sources, it's harder than ever.
Well, I think the biggest problem right now is the new talent trees introduce so many new passive effects as opposed to active abilities that it's kind of hard to keep up with. Oh, I need to do this before this, or when this procs, I need to do this. So naturally you're going to lose track of what you have to use and when. And he basically states, Ion states, we don't want your raid leader to tell you to turn off your DPS manually. The penalty is going to be too big. We want you to progress naturally. So I think that what he's actually trying to say is this is more of a story mode rotation to kind of get you through questing, maybe some light dungeons, maybe some LFR or a normal pug or something of that nature. But I do think that it would be an awesome piece of content if Liquid were to go, all right, guys, we're going to try and kill mythic Gallywicks on single button rotations on all our DPSers. And that would be awesome content.
That would be awesome content.
And I want to pose this question to you about, Ion talked about incorporating DBM bigwigs into the base game instead of using an add-on for it, as well as details. Do you think that World of Warcraft should tell you in 5 seconds this big thing is going to happen? Or do you think that should be something that an external add-on tells you?
I think it should be an add-on that tells you, because I think that it should be understood that, you know, that means get out of there, right? But the game should also give you ample time to where if you're a second late to reaction, that you can get out of it in time. I think that the game right now is constantly in the state of, let's give you less real estate during this fight, so you're always looking down versus looking forward. And then we put a frontal cone, you know, so it's that if you're standing too far away, that you have to use your mobility ability. So it's like this constant aversion of eyes to try to deceive you. And I think that's like, it's like nasty tactics. There's Dark Souls fights out there that are very fair, and there's Dark Souls fights that are very unfair. Fights start to feel unfair whenever it's like, well, I'm dodging this and I'm also soaking this. But where I position myself, because I had to soak the nearest target, put me in a bad position for the next AoE that's happening. And now I'm in a really bad spot. And so now I have to use mobility ability. And then now I have to use a heal because I got hit partially by that. And so it feels like the game is punishing natural human behavior versus steering into natural human behavior. So I think it should always be an add-on that does that, but the game should present that in a way that's always understandable and that you shouldn't need an add-on in order to do. I think that's kind of just the way it is.
Well, I think right now, if you're not a Race to World First guild, or if let's say you're like a mid-tier mythic guild, essentially what you're waiting for is you're waiting for the worst 2 or 3 people in your guild to not get picked for a mechanic and not mess up in order to kill a boss. That's essentially what you're doing right now, as opposed to having fights where there's more creative freedom for a guild to go, okay, like, how are we going to approach mines on Sprocket? Are we going to burn cooldowns? Are we going to have a hunter turtle them? Like that's a cool little mechanic to figure out on your own. And I think that kind of builds more team camaraderie, as opposed to just, all right, everybody, turn your bigwigs on, download this weak aura. It's going to tell you what to do and when to do it. And hopefully you don't get picked for the mechanic, and let's just mash our buttons and go home. And that's why I think raiding has been slowly dying. It's because of the fact that it's become too streamlined, as opposed to, I guess, an adventure where you actually had to figure out, how are we as a guild gonna solve this problem, as opposed to, well, Liquid used 4 boomkins and here's their weak aura pack that they completed with paid people. we're just gonna download it and we're gonna use it. and that to me just seems counterintuitive to a problem solving, and that's why everyone's more focused on damage than anything else, because everything else is done for them.
Yep. And speaking of damage, I mean, the main topic of this podcast, I think that is really important to talk about, is about the meta guides and why meta guides have become sort of these pigeonholed concepts. And before we jump into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about goldcap.com, a fantastic site that's going to give you the guides, whether you play SOD, Classic, Cataclysm, or retail. It's going to give you guides that help you get the gold that you need for the tons of things that you need to purchase and look good doing it. Because nowadays, I don't even make the stuff myself. I just go to auction house, I buy it, I get all my consumables, I get all my things myself. So please, if you want to get the best guides out there made by the best gold guide makers, and not just be somebody who tries to flip every once in a while or tries to sell just your resources to try to get something here and there, goldcap.com is the way to do it. And on top of that, they've given us a 10% off code. So if you haven't signed up yet, ShawnSetGo 10 will get you 10% off of the membership, and that way you can get the best gold guides out there. But I'll pose the question to you when it comes to the terms of like, you know, looking to guide makers and the biggest issues. What do you think is a way for a player to navigate through those guides in a way that isn't going to pigeonhole them into, say, one spec and only this spec, or doing this way? What do you think is the best way for players to properly navigate these guides? Because people are going to use guides like no matter what we do, but what do you think is the way for a player to do those? Is there somebody who does it well, or is there a way that you do it that you think that other players should do it?
I think that when you're reading these guides, you should look to see what abilities are important under what circumstances, and start using, like, thinking about what content you're trying to do. If you're trying to raid or trying to do dungeons, okay, what AoE talents does a Devastation Evoker have that are going to help me burn ads down faster? And work on looking at those abilities and seeing when you can fit those into your rotation. And secondly, there's a lot of really good content creators that do POV dungeon runs. There's one guy called Topics that does a lot of Prot Warrior dungeon runs, and I love watching him, but I watch what he does and when he does it, because he's murdering these +16s, +17s as a Prot Warrior, and I'm watching him, what abilities that he's using and when, and it shows, okay, not only is he doing good damage, but he's not dying. And same thing with a DPS player, okay? So for instance, as a Devastation Evoker, I love using Deep Breath, the big strafing fire ability. Well, I decided to watch a Devastation Evoker, and they never used it once in a dungeon. So I said, okay, I probably shouldn't be using that.
Yeah.
And it's a big cooldown, and you would think you'd use it, but they didn't use it once. And once I took it out of my rotation, my DPS went up because I wasn't wasting time. So
Yeah.
don't take the rotation itself as gospel. I mean, they do a pretty good job of breaking down like the openers. That's a good thing. And then also the baseline priority system, but you can't don't just hit an ability on cooldown to hit it on cooldown. Think about what that ability does and when you could use it to the best of for your group, not for you. And the second you start thinking about how this group is going to overcome this challenge, the better off you're going to be. Because if you think about it, do you think that Liquid's DPS players parse the best they could parse on Mythic Gallywix? Probably not. But guess what? They got the boss down. He died. They got the world first. Does anybody remember how much damage THD did on that boss? No. Does it matter? No, it doesn't. So start thinking about what is important for your class and what's important for each specific situation, like a certain boss in a certain dungeon or a certain pack or something of that nature. Just start gaming out, become Columbo, right? Just start thinking, how am I going to overcome this? What do I have in my toolkit to do this? Oh, I can use Engulf in this situation, or I can use Shockwave in this situation. I need to hold Shockwave to make sure that I've got it to nuke this pack that's going to have all these casters, that kind of stuff, right? So just ask a lot of questions and don't just hit an ability on cooldown to hit it on cooldown. Think about why it's being done and when.
No, I 100% agree. I think sometimes it's just about like trying things out and doing things, maybe in the non-optimal way, but going, okay, now I know why it doesn't work. Now I know why, hey, if I'm popping this and it says do shadow damage, maybe I should hit this because it says increase shadow damage. Okay, that makes sense. And I should do it in this order. Okay. And then, but what situation should I do this in? It's like kind of like ask those specific micro questions before you ask about the big overall rotation. Go ask about the specific abilities and why and where it's used before you go into a bunch of different things. Because I think that if you're approaching a class from the big picture, you have a big open mind about it, and I think that's good, but you shouldn't have your mind so open that your brain falls out and then you just go, well, I just hit this ability because the guide said do it. So yes. so it's like this being open-minded, but there's also kind of narrow your focus a little bit, I think, is the big thing. And it's difficult sometimes with a lot of these classes that have so much button bloat, but it's definitely important.
I think the best thing that you said in that statement was the micro questions. That's a great way to label what I was talking about, was just ask the micro questions about everything.
Yeah. And so to close this episode, I think that there's a fantastic conversation that we'll have after the episode. So if you are a Patreon member, you'll be able to see our extra little conversation. But in this, we had a lot of things that I think that that are changes that are coming to the game, that a lot of expectations, the biggest of course being that, should we have what we're using be baked into the game? Should we have the expectations of our classes? Should this now be a normal pop-up with this whole cooldown manager despite its iffy release? Should this now be the new normal, where it's like now, instead of kind of simplifying those things, we have them just more visible and present? Basically, are these changes for the better? Are they for the worse? I think there's a lot of questions that I have for the viewers right now and for the listeners. But as we close, I think that looking to the more positive side of things, I think that there are cases where I think that there's routes for casual players to get better at the game and improve at the game. Delves are solo content, yes, but there are ways for you to get into that Mythic Plus content. And I think that this season has been a great season for players to start and introduce themselves more and more into harder and harder content. I just hope that that trend continues, where things are projected more clearly and that Blizzard's goals are to make those things more clear to the everyday player, instead of going, well, let's just make sure we make this content hard. Like, I don't think that should be the overall goal. I think the overall goal should be that it's enjoyable, projectable, it's achievable. But like you said before, it's the adventure. I think that's the main thing that I hope in the future. What do you think about the overall aspect of what we talked about today?
I think that overall, the direction of the game is moving towards making it a more palatable game as opposed to a more, okay, you know, like I think clicking on a weak aura string in order to kill a boss faster or better, I think those days need to end as soon as possible. And I think we're making strides in that direction. And I think that's a good thing, because it'll just be easier to, because right now, if I sat down with my wife and tried to get her to play WoW, and so, okay, in order to fight this boss, I need you to download this weak or this add-on called Weak Auras. I need you to click on this string, and then I need you to move it to where you can see it, and then you can pop up a mine on Sprocket, and then it'll tell you to wait to pop the next one. And she's going to turn that game off. She's going to turn it off. So we need to come back to basics, and I think that's what they're doing here, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, because I think if we're truly going to make things accessible for players, I think we need to go back to. I think we need to go back to as far as Cataclysm, oddly enough, because I think that's where the game truly started to sort of deviate between something that was accessible to players and started to be you're either capable or you're not. And I think a lot of players now are either much older, or the common age group is that 35 to 44 range. So and it's not these high-end guild. Not everyone's this high-end guild. So I think that we need to make this game to where, or influence this game in a positive direction that makes it accessible for those players who are coming up on that age group that left the game back in Cataclysm. So I think that's the main thing. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Of course, give this video a like and subscribe to the YouTube page, as well as the Patreon. It's free to subscribe, and as well as we ask questions in there about future episodes and things that we have on our minds to kind of see where the community is at. And I think it's a lot of fun. So if you'd like to subscribe to there, subscribe for free, but then also want to catch some of that exclusive content, all that cut content from the episodes, then they have the full episodes. We have the full episodes there. It's like 6 hours plus of extra content from these past 2 episodes that we've done. So we definitely talk about this a lot more than you see. So, but until next time, I have been ShawnSetGO, and I have it's been an absolute joy to make this episode. Midnight, where can they find you? Where can they see your content and see you stream, make content, etc.?
You can catch me on Midnight, MidnyteTV on YouTube. I'll stream there, as well as on twitch.tv/MidnyteTV. You can catch me there. I stream pretty often. So yeah, that's where I'll be.
All right. And guys, have a good one. I'll catch you in the next one, and we'll see you in the after show. Peace.